Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of the African Five-A-Side podcast, where we're going to be speaking to 24 writers covering 24 teams at the 2023 African Cup of Nations, which, of course, is going to be played in 2024. Today, I have with me a very special guest, somebody that's close to my heart, my Egyptian journalist and colleague, Mohamed Quotb, who's really freelance for a lot of different people, very knowledgeable about the football game, former BBC Arabic, if I'm not mistaken. And he's here to speak to me about the Pharaohs. How are you doing, Mohammed?
Hi, man. Thanks for having me. Great to be on the show.
Absolute pleasure. So we're going to start with the State of the Union. Uh, Basically, the state of the Egyptian national football team. Since 2022 Afcon, Egypt has won 13 matches. That's the most on the African continent. They're coming in with a new coach, Rui Vitoria. They seem to be winning matches, but at the same time, we hear some stories that have emerged out of camp very recently about maybe some more senior players not being happy with the amount of playing time and maybe being discarded from the group, or maybe themselves personally withdrawn from the group. What can you tell me about the general state of the Egyptian national team? How's the feeling in the Egyptian camp just 2, 3 weeks away from the tournament now?
I think there's this sense of um, stability in some sort under Rui Vitoria. But you mentioned Egypt winning this many games over the last couple of years under Rui, but I don't think Egypt was put to a proper test since the World Cup playoff against Senegal. It was just the two friendlies against Algeria, against Tunisia that we might count as a proper test. The pre-World Cup friendly against Belgium. But apart from this, with all due respect to any team that Egypt played in the last 18 months or so, they were all winnable. With Vitoria, without them, they were all winnable. And yeah, there are some players who are unhappy with their situation. One of them decided to retire from international football, who's Tariq Hamid, who's been a cornerstone for the national team for the last 5, 6 years or so. But you would think with the number of senior players unhappy about their playing time that you would find new, fresh faces coming into the national team. But I didn't see Rui Vitoria introduce any new player apart from one player who's almost 30 or above 30, is Mahmoud Hamada. Apart from this, it's the same old faces we had under Carlos Queiroz. And now we're hearing that Abdullah Saeed, who's 38, who's announced his retirement from international football months ago, is being called up for the national team in the 55-player squad. So there's this sense that nothing much has changed under Rui Vitoria in terms of the names, in terms of who's playing, in terms of the starting 11. And we're yet to see how this team is going to act under the pressure of a big occasion. It's just the friendly with Algeria in Al Ain and the friendly against Tunisia that would count as proper tests. Apart from that, not a single competitive game under Vitoria that we can assess how far has this team come from that point under Queiroz when they were that close from winning the Cup of Nations. They were a penalty away from the World Cup. But since then, nothing much has happened in terms of assessing progress and where can we put this Egypt team in terms of contenders for this Afcon.
Do you think part of that is because, as you mentioned, they were just a penalty kick away from the World Cup and a penalty kick away from the Afcon, and 2017 they were very close to winning the tournament as well. They were finalists. Is there that impression that you just needed a little bit of luck maybe to get over the hump and to win the Afcon title? And so there isn't a need to change things, to instill a revolution really. Maybe we just stay with the same faces, the Shenawis, the Salahs, the Trezeguets, the Tariq Hamids, etc., and Nennis. And this time they're going to get it done. And is there a lot of pressure on Egypt to get it done with this generation? Because especially Mohamed Salah hasn't really won an Afcon yet.
There's a bit of that, but you would think when Egypt signed Rui Vitoria, the objective was the 2026 World Cup. He's, I mean, in at least the last 10 years or so, he's the only manager who signed a 4-year contract. And when you sign a manager, when you sign an international manager for 4 years, you expect them to introduce a whole different team. It's no longer a short-term objective. Afcons, we won 7 of them. This is what Egyptians talk about. Yeah, we always want to win more. But at the end of the day, the target now is the World Cup. And after what Morocco did in Qatar, it's no longer just the World Cup. It's doing well at the World Cup, which is a whole different story for Egyptians, having not won a single game in the World Cup yet. So, yeah, I'm a bit disappointed from a personal point of view that Vitoria hasn't introduced more new names to the national team. When you look at the 55-player squad, the youngest of them, Ahmed Nabil Kuka, who's barely playing with Al Ahly, he's 22. So the youngest player in your squad is 22. You don't have an 18-year-old. You don't have a 19-year-old. Back in the days, in every Afcon winning Egyptian team, you would have one young talent at least. Ahmed Fathi back in the days, he would play in the final at centre-back at 20 years of age. This is no longer the case. And I don't think this is only on Vitoria to blame, because it's the whole setup in Egypt. A player is still considered up and coming until the age of 24, which is probably the age he should be smashing it in Europe if he is good enough. But yeah, I mean, this is the last opportunity for many of the players. Second last for the generation of Higazi, Salah, and Nenni. At the very maximum, I would expect them to play another Afcon after this one. So yeah, they came very close in 2017, penalty away against Senegal and Cameroon. But yeah, I think I was hoping to see more new faces if we're talking about a 2026 World Cup objective. But now that we've moved it back to the same old faces, we expect nothing less but them going all the way and winning it, because you're no longer dealing with a long-term project. Now you've taken it back to this, yeah, let's just go out there with Cote d'Ivoire and win it. Because when you call Nenni, call Higazi, call Shinawis, and call Salah, then it's no longer about a long-term project. I don't think Egypt will start with any of the Olympic team in Afcon. The Olympic team has produced some interesting players for the future, but they're very relied on in the national team. So yeah, I was hoping with a long-term project, with what we were told when Vitoria signed for Egypt for 4 years, to see a younger squad. But it seems it's going to be the same old faces again, which is not bad. I have nothing against the old faces. They did so much for Egypt, especially the generation of Nenni, Higazi, Mohamed Salah, and they missed that. The legacy as this generation, they're not going to sink into the Egyptian football history as a solid, coherent generation without an Afcon win. Yeah, they've made it to the World Cup. Yeah, they've made it to a couple of finals. But yeah, you know how you've been to Egypt, man, and you know how strongly we feel about Afcon in Egypt and how important it is, and how Egyptians introduce themselves to the world of football. So without a win in Afcon, yeah, you can score as many goals in Europe or win as many trophies domestically, but Afcon is the real deal. So yeah. So many factors. It's not just Vitoria to blame, but I was expecting a man of his profile to be bold enough to just introduce new faces. I feel, Maher, that Carlos Queiroz, in 6 months or so, managed to introduce more faces, more new faces into this Egypt team than Vitoria did in the last 18 months.
The chief of those being Mohamed Abdel Mun'im, who exploded at the 2021 Afcon. And with Rui Vitoria's profile, I mean, coaching at Benfica, you know, and those kinds of youth stars that he sort of helped produce, like Joao Felix, like Ruben Dias, you would think that it would be a little bit more of a place of emphasis. But let's talk about Rui Vitoria. Let's talk tactics. I think Pep Guardiola wrote in his book, if I'm not mistaken, that it was very, very difficult to play his Benfica side when Pep was coaching Bayern Munich, that it was one of the toughest defenses to play in Europe. I looked over his defensive record after that with Spartak Moscow and a few different clubs, even in Nasser. Wasn't spectacular. And Egypt, with previous coaches like Hector Cooper, coaches like Carlos Queiroz, I think fans were happy with the results, but at the same time, maybe there was a little bit of,
They
because
didn't
Egypt
like what they're
is,
watching.
yes,
Yeah.
we're used to seeing them with the Shahata sides with the high-flying offense, and Egypt is about playing technical football and attacking football. So you have those previous coaches getting the results, but not really with the style of play. You bring in Rui Vitoria. What kind of coach is he? Is he a continuation of those coaches that like Quiros and Cooper, or is he more of a throwback to Shahata, or is he something of a balance between defensive and attacking
I think
football?
he is trying to strike the right balance between the recent identity of Egypt, which is a reactive side, sitting at the back, very solid, hard to score against, hitting on counters, and the flamboyantly entertaining Hassan Shahata side, whose players were given so much freedom to create. But let's not forget, Meher, that this team, the mechanism of Egypt attacking in the last 5, 6, 7 years was tailored to serve Mohamed Salah as a goal scorer. So the end game is to not just pass to Salah, but any kind of mechanism should be backed up at Salah's end. And what Victoria might make use of, might take advantage of this time around, is Mohamed Salah's gameplay with Liverpool. Look at the amount of chances he provides for Darwin Núñez, for example. This is one thing he might capitalize on with the form Mustafa Mohamed is on in France, with how many goals Omar Marmoush has been scoring in Germany, how many goals Trezeguet has been scoring in Turkey. Remarkable player to come back from all the injuries and be at this level still. I think Vitoria is still a Portuguese manager who are cautious enough to sit at the back and contain opposition, but he's aware as well of what made the fans unhappy with Queiroz, Cooper, and the previous managers who did well in terms of results, but didn't do that great in terms of earning the nation's satisfaction. So yeah, he's trying to strike the right balance. Still, again, he hasn't been put to the right test to assess whether he's gonna. I wonder how is he gonna deal with a team like Ghana in the group stage of Afcon, for example, with the pace they have with Kudus, Semenyo, and the others. How is he going to deal with that? And this is going to be really telling. This is going to explain to us more how Vitoria is tailoring his team. I want to go back to calling Abdullah Saeed up, for example. This tells you something about how he wants to play it.
Because Abdullah Saeed is like too old and too slow to play on the wing, right? He's not going to be a striker. He's going to be
exactly. So he wants someone to hold on to the ball. And I think over the last 18 months or so under Vitoria, he did manage to find a plan A and a plan B in every position, apart from this very position, the number 10, the one, the Abu Trika of this generation. We don't have Abu Trika can never be replicated, right? But he's trying to find this one player that can put everything together, and he couldn't find it in anyone but Abdullah Saeed. And I have to be honest with you, I'm struggling to think of a player with the same profile. But this tells you something about how he wants to play. He wants to control more over the ball, because Abdullah Saeed without the ball wouldn't have much to do with the game. So that's a good sign. If the Egyptian fans are after possession football, that's a good sign. On the other hand, the goal scoring capabilities of Egypt this time is better, because Mustafa Mohamed is on a better form at Nantes. Trezeguet has been doing well in recent months, and Marmoush is exploding in Germany at the minute. So that's a good sign. That could lead to Egypt going a bit forward. But then on the other hand, what would hold Egypt back is the condition of the centre backs. Hegazi has just come back from injury. He can't play a high line. And I've just seen him play for Al Ittihad in the Club World Cup. He looks even slower than his
He's never been a very fast centre half. He's had knee injuries.
He's never been a fast centre half, but he's even slower than he used to be. And you would hope he would pick up some form. El Winch, who used to partner him in the previous Afcon before Abdel Manab burst into the scene, still we're yet to see him. He's just come back from an ACL injury. So I wouldn't think Egypt would go for a high line. They would still sit at the back, play a medium to deep block. But when they go forward, when they possess the ball, I think they're going to play more and hopefully capitalize on this shift in Mohamed Salah's gameplay, so he can provide. He can just put the players through. He no longer the player who wants to score all the goals. He wants to involve everyone. And I feel, Maher, that Egypt so far hasn't made use of Mustafa Mohamed's goal scoring capabilities. This man has been lethal with the Zamalek, especially via crosses. He's supplying with enough crosses. And what we have seen from him in France has shown his development as a ball playing player as well. That's something he's been missing when he was playing for Zamalek. So I think this should be Mustafa Mohamed's tournament in terms of goal scoring, not just the first player to press up, not just the first player who would come down and support the midfield. No, he should introduce himself as a goal scorer, and this would, I think, take Egypt to a whole different level.
Okay, let me put some pressure on you now, and let me ask you to choose a starting 11, because for me, the main headache for me is that attacking line. Like you mentioned, so many players are in form. You know, between Trezeguet, Marmoush, Salah, and Mustafa. Marmoush can play as a striker and has been playing as a striker sometimes for Frankfurt, and even Kahraba has been playing as a striker for Al Ahly at times.
Kahraba's been great. Yeah, shout out to Kahraba. I have to say something about
Zizou's
Kahraba.
somebody that's been, you know,
Unbelievable transformation. He's been always. I always like Kahraba's gameplay because he's been always disruptive to the opposition. One-on-ones, he was great when he was playing as a winger for Zamalek back in the days. But his transformation into a number 9 under Marcel Koller, phenomenal. What a player.
So how do you fit everybody into a starting 11? I'm going to put the challenge on you. Go ahead. How would you play with this Egyptian national team?
Well, I think there is no debate that the Shenawi will start the tournament. Well, remember Gabaski, he's no longer at the same level he was at a couple of years ago. So Shenawi is undisputedly going to be the goalkeeper. On the right back position, Vitoria likes Mohamed Hani so much, and Hani has been playing for Al Ahly for so long, but he's still to prove a point with Egypt. I feel like he lacks this, not just the physical toughness, the mental toughness to play in Africa. He's had it all with Al Ahly, but I'm just talking about playing for Egypt. And last time we had Omar Kamal, who was very good, picked up so much experience under Kirosh. He's still doing well with Future, and he's even a target for Al Ahly. So I would put Omar Kamal on the right back. Centre backs is one of them is undisputedly reserved from Mohamed Abdelmenem, great defender. I think personally, if I was Abdelmenem, I would seek a move after this Afcon, and he has more than what it takes to play at the very high level in Europe at the minute. Hegazi, I didn't like much what I've seen from Hegazi in the Club World Cup. He looked slower. He's always been crucial for Egypt, and we can always excuse him because he's been missing for a long time. But I don't see a better player in the squad to put ahead of Hegazi. So it will have to be Hegazi next to Abdelmenem, not just for his capabilities, but for his leadership, for what he can add in terms of leadership to the back four as well. So I'll put Hegazi next to Abdelmenem and hope that he grows into the tournament as he always did. On the left, Vitoria likes Mohamed Hamdi. He's an efficient left back, goes forward, can even play in the midfield. He plays with Pyramid sometimes in the midfield, but he's a very disciplined left back with a lot of energy. But there is Ahmed Fattouh, and Ahmed Fattouh has a whole big story. Skillful player, one of these five-a-side. If I'm going to a five-a-side later today, I would take Ahmed Fattouh with me. But he's struggling with his Zamalek with some problems. He hasn't been playing for some time. He's a great player in terms of handling the pressure. He doesn't feel the pressure. He just takes everything as a five-a-side game, which is great to have in a big tournament. But I mean, given what's happening at the minute, it will have to be Mohamed Hamdi on the left back. It will have to be a 4-3-3. I don't think there is a Portuguese manager who's ever played without a 4-3-3. So
in the 13 matches that Vitoria has coached in Egypt, he's only ever played with 4 defenders. He's never played with 5 or 3 or anything.
Yeah. So 3 in the midfield. We don't know how fit Nenni will be for Afcon. We don't know how ready he will be. So as it stands, I very much like Marwan Atiyah for Al-Ahly. He's more of a Tariq Hamid, but with the spin. He's got this ability to put the ball forward. He's a good passer, and he's shown some very good qualities with Al-Ahly. He's adapted in absolutely no time, coming from Al-Ittihad to Al-Ahly and play in the Champions League, then in the Club World Cup. A very good player. I think he could be Egypt's anchor man. Right next to him will be Imam Ashur. For me, Imam Ashur is the next big thing in Egyptian football, with all the hype that accompanied his transfer to Al-Ahly, with how little effort he made to adapt in Denmark. But he's a great player, great talent. He has it all in the midfield. He can play number 6, number 8, and even number 10 now under Kolar with Al-Ahly. So he's got this element that was missing in the 2021 Egypt team at Afcon, which is a midfield player that can take the ball forward and have a go with a shot one time.
Something that like Ahmed Souley or Tariq Hamid, they don't really have that in their arsenal.
Yeah. No. He's got loads more to offer in the attacking third. He can go on the sides, he can cross the ball, and he can shoot. And in Afcon in particular, if you don't shoot, you miss out on so much opportunity to score. So I would put Imam Ashur as one of the 3 in the midfield. Between Hamdi Fathi and Nenni and Vitoria's favorite Mahmoud Hamada, it's one of them who will complete the trio. Hamada is a very good facilitator, good runner. He serves all the tactical needs quite well, but he hasn't been this compelling to fans. And obviously the fact that he doesn't play for the big fish in Egyptian football or even in Europe kind of puts some obstacles in his way. But Vitoria is very much convinced with him, and I think he will have a shot at this Afcon. But I think Hamdi Fathi as well is someone you cannot ignore. Physically really strong, can win the ball back. And under Kolar in the last season with Al-Ahly, he proved that he can go forward and play as this player who comes up from the blue and turns up in the box and hits the ball in the back of the net. So he provides some options as well. So I think I would choose personally Hamdi Fathi, but this is all pending in Nenni. I think if Nenni read, it'd be hard to ignore him with all the experience he had. With you can't just have a Nenni and bench him for Egypt. The attacking third is the $1 million question. But let's just agree that Mo Salah is above conversation. So his right hand side is just reserved. I don't see a better number 9 in Egypt than Mustafa Mohamed, at least in Africa, at least in this atmosphere. Who's on the left wing? This is the $1 million question, I think. Between Marmoush and Trezeguet, there is very little to decide on. I feel it hasn't quite happened for Marmoush in Egypt yet. He does what he does in Germany brilliantly. And I think he's better when he plays a bit closer to the striker, to the number 9 position, than as a winger. And I feel Trezeguet understands more what is needed from an Egypt winger who plays on the other side of Salah. Because when you play on the other side of Salah, you have to cut into the box sometimes. And at other times, you have to play on the very line to make way for Salah to come and cut into the box. So I feel Trezeguet has more of an understanding to this. This would be a tie call. This would be like the night before the game call for Vitoria. But if it was me, I would start with Trezeguet, and I would obviously involve Marmoush at one point of the game. Kahraba will be my super sub. Kahraba will have to be my super sub because he's so disruptive to games. The one downside with Kahraba is when he comes in as a sub, he's not as focused comparing to when he starts the game. So you need to just mentally prepare him for this role. You're going to be my super sub. You're going to be my Giddu for this tournament, if you know what I mean.
Definitely.
which is not easy, but you would hope that Vitoria finds this communication, this understanding with Kahraba, Mermoush, that you guys are going to be my super subs, you're going to be involved in almost every game, and it comes down to who grows into the tournament. Because Giddu, for example, Abdel Menam, this is what Egypt and Afcon is all about. That player that comes from absolutely nowhere and just dominates the scene. So yeah, this would be my starting 11.
I like it. I like it. Especially like Trezeguet seems like one of those players that when Egypt needs an important goal or needs an important contribution, some players have that knack of like coming up, showing up on the big occasion when it matters the most. It seems like Trezeguet has that about him in the last few years.
I have to say I've been really impressed with Trezeguet recently. When he got this downgrade in his career from Aston Villa going down to Turkey, he didn't lose it. When he picked up this big injury, he didn't lose it. And yeah, he's a different man when he plays for Egypt. He's one of these players. We always had this in Egypt, that there is one player who
on the
would
African
be
continent with national team form and club form.
absolutely thriving with Egypt, and he wouldn't show the same level with his club. But I mean, with Trezeguet, his working ethic is phenomenal. His understanding of what Egypt needs in terms of the other winger on the other side of Mohamed Salah, absolutely phenomenal.
But we're running out of time. We have 5 minutes left. Let's go through. The next category is star player. Can we just agree that it's Mohamed Salah?
Hands down.
Do you have anything to add?
You can save your time on this. You can save on time on this.
Any kind of insight, anything that we need to know about him this year? You seem to indicate that he's more of a creator than a finisher this year.
I'm looking forward to seeing more of this. And Vitoria has to capitalize on this. If Darwin Núñez had scored from 50% of the chances Salah provided him with, he would have been top scorer of the Premier League at the minute. And yeah, he seems in a good mood. He seems ready. And yeah, I mean, what we have seen from Salah in the previous Afcon, rising up to the occasion, showing more character, getting the players around him, is the exact thing we need from him this time around. And yeah, I mean, hands down, the main man, hands down, the one that puts Egypt on that level of, one of the contenders to win this.
Next category is young player that will emerge. You told me that the youngest player on the 55
the youngest player is 22, man.
So let's modify this one. Let's give it a little Egyptian twist. Who's a player that maybe people don't know about that will emerge? Kind of like your Abdel Monem or your Geddo, or a player like that we're going to discover at the Afcon. Is it Marwan Atiyah? Is it someone else?
We know him in Egypt, and he's sparked so much controversy. Imam Ashur, he's been the man of the moment for Zamalek for a long time.
Quick question. Is Imam Ashur a throwback to those Egyptian players that were so talented but seem to lack a little bit of professional mentality, like the Hussam Ghalis, somebody like that?
You need to tweak his mindset a little bit. And if there is any team that can do that, it's Al Ahly. And if there is any manager who would kind of enforce this discipline, and he's already been dismissed out of one camp, the most recent camp actually, for disciplinary reasons. So I hope that he rises up to the occasion. I actually hope that he gets called up, because he's a great addition to the Egyptian national. If he gets called up and he plays for Egypt, he would show some very good capabilities. He's one of these. He's a throwback to the likes of Hosni Abdurrabbu, Ahmed Hassan. Have it all, can score goals, can come back and win the ball back. But yeah, I mean, it all starts from here, doesn't it?
Last thing before we wrap up, and I thank you again for joining me. Prediction. I have Egypt in my little too early Afcon preview. I have them as one of the favorites. I have them with Ivory Coast, who are hosts, Senegal defending champions, Morocco because of what they did at the World Cup, and I have Egypt here simply because for me it seems like Egypt knows who their main players are. They kind of know what their identity is. They kind of know what they have to do. So there's a lot of coherence for me in the Egyptian national team. Do you agree with that? And how far do you see them going?
Oh, yeah, it's hard to ignore Egypt when you list some, contenders to win this one. But this is West Africa. This is the Ivory Coast. This is Afcon. And I don't see too many teams more ready than Egypt to win it. But in the meantime, I'm yet to see this Egypt under this manager play in Africa. So, and Egypt is the kind of team that grows into the tournament. They just start slowly and then pick it up from there, a couple of wins, and they just go on all the way. So I think Egypt is a solid team. They can go all the way and win it, but they need everything to come together come the tournament time. And this is one big challenge for everything to come together, for all the players to come in a good condition. I do agree with you that Egypt should make it at least to the final four, but yeah, anything less with this experienced squad, anything less than the final four would be a disappointment, definitely.
Mohamed, thanks for joining me. Really, really appreciate it. And
Thank you for having me.
unfortunately, you're not going to be in the Everest list if I'm not mistaken. But anybody that wants to follow your analysis, your football insight can follow you where?
I'm on Twitter, and I'm not going to be in the Ivory sadly, unless you offer me a private jet or something. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I'm on Twitter. I'm doing stuff for beIN Sports, for Al Jazeera, for the BBC, and hopefully some stuff for Afcon. Yeah, who knows?
Very good. I'll include all of his social media handles in the description below. Mohamed, thank you one last time, and
Thank
we'll
you
speak
so
soon.
much. Thank you.
Peace.